kicked off. There are 2.5, I suppose, agenda items. Actually, I just go this way. I think it'll be okay. I might try to take this off here. There are 2.5 agenda items where one was where we said we'd follow up on 3 purchase order policies. This was at the request of the President of Council. He was assigning out from the audit report some of the activities that he wanted to close out before the end of the year. We all know that we want to get as many of the things off the list because that's what helps us make our case to get out of fiscal emergency. The 3 items that were on our assignment were putting together a formal purchasing policy that covers blanket purchases, then and now purchases, which we'll get to in a second, and then what we discussed at the last finance meeting, the approval process and some of the hierarchy and notes that come around that. So I suppose it's worth going through. I emailed some of you, but it's worth kind of just reading through a cleaned up version of what we talked about there, and then go through the 3 purchase order types and the what the policy is drafted there. And I just kind of wanted your feedback to make sure that everything that we collectively wanted to see in these policies are there, and then I'll provide them to President Miracle. As you saw, the version that you saw in your email was looked over and turned into a Word document by the law department. They didn't have too many changes, it was just more formatting items. So really it's just up to us to make sure that everything that's in here kind of makes sense for our committee. I'll go through them. The approval hierarchy. At the top is the mayor, then safety service director, then the department heads, and the thresholds relating to those go down 100,000, 50,000, and 1,000. Another way to say that is if it's over 50,000, the safety service director would need to approve the PO before the department head would move forward with spending against it. Likewise, if it was over 100,000, if the safety service director had wanted to enter into a PO over $100,000, the mayor would have to sign off. But then where does council play our part? We said council approval is required by majority vote on a written ordinance for any purchases equal or exceeding $50,000. The proposed purchase should be brought before council after the bid process has been performed. That's in the previous section. And in most cases requires a minimum of 3 vendor quotes and follows the approval hierarchy that we talked about just a second ago. Another interesting point that I wanted to make sure that we were all comfortable with was award criteria. I actually saw this when I was just kind of benchmarking against other cities, and they were saying, do you want to have your contract award be based on lowest price? And I said that that's going to be our default mode. If you get 3 bids and it's the lowest price, go with the lowest price. But let's say that one of the department heads said, well, I know that the second highest cost, or second lowest cost, kind of second place, which would have been passed over, is actually a better fit because it'll, the widget will last longer. It's of better quality, or that we have a better service contract with these folks, and we should go that we should work with them. Well, I want to make sure there was an approval hierarchy there too, and we're going to call that either best value or longest life or best present value if there were cash flows involved, and that requires a 1/1 approval. So if the department head wishes to move forward, the safety service director would need to approve that selection bias, even though it was below the dollar threshold. So it's kind of like if you want to do something other than lowest price, the concept of the dollars goes out the window, and you need your 1/1 approval for that. We talked about the bid process last time. No changes there. Bid timing, all process from cradle to grave, should be completed in 6 months. Chris, you talked about how you wanted to make sure that all purchases greater than $5,000, and the word we kind of came to was a good faith effort must be made to consider and adhere to, where possible, line items in the current year's capital improvement plan. Obviously, it's fluid. We're not always going to stick to it. It's just kind of something to say, let's try to use this to make this document very useful and meaningful. And it's also just going to be a nice precedent we set over the future years. And then record keeping was also something we saw in the audit report. I just said to have record retention policies established with the administration and law department. So that's the thresholds and hierarchy that we talked about in terms of setting a purchase policy. And then the other items that President Miracle said that he assigned to us as part of the audit report, we're talking about setting general practices for entering into purchase orders. There are 3 types of purchase orders that are specifically discussed. The first is, a regular purchase order. I think we've all known that. You enter into an agreement. It's basically your contract. You get invoiced after the effort is made, and you pay against it. Blanket purchase orders, however, can be opened for any amount and used on multiple vendors. They are valid for the end of a current fiscal year and are restricted to one appropriation line. These are potentially dangerous because of the nature that they're open-ended. And so I said here, City Council must set the dollar figure and the dollar figure that can be utilized within the current year and should be approved with a majority vote on a written ordinance. And then I list out some of the examples of acceptable blanket purchases below. But it's just to basically say, again, because there's no dollar figure yet, that's kind of the point of a blanket purchase, all of those sort of agreements should be approved by a majority vote in council on a written ordinance. And then there was something then and now purchase. This was brought up not in our finance committee meeting, but actually at the at 2 general council meetings ago by President Miracle saying, I need you to write a purchasing policy for then and now POs. That's where prior certificate of funds was not able to be obtained prior to the contract or order involving the expenditure of the money. So said in kind of layman's terms, we received an invoice from a vendor that has a date that's prior to a PO date, or the PO doesn't exist yet. So you've incurred costs and you've been billed for it, but you didn't have the PO yet. That's a then and now PO. In such situations, City Council must approve the PO raised for the received invoices by majority vote on a written ordinance within 30 days of us receiving the invoice, or that's kind of like our being notified of it. And I also said, to the extent possible, we're committed to ensuring these are only used in emergency situations. They must be situations where they're unseen, unplanned, and require immediate action. I gave an example of towing of a broke down vehicle. We might be invoiced without before we are ever able to write a purchase order because we didn't know about it at the time. It's kind of an emergency situation. So hopefully those are limited in nature. We don't see too many of them. But those are just important kind of tag-ons that we wanted to make sure that they were in the City of Norwood purchasing policy that we're going to submit to the administration and to President Miracle. That was a lot of me talking. Any other questions or things that you feel like I didn't cover from when we last spoke at the Finance Committee?
The only thing that comes to my mind is I'm assuming these numbers that you got here for the 1,000, 50,000, and 100,000, these are numbers that are already being used and that are probably, where did those numbers come from? And I'm assuming that's kind of like the general rule. That's what we're using now.
General rule is the right way to say that. The whole point of this is to document very formally practices that are mostly already in place. For example, 50,000 is what typically comes before council as the threshold for POs. So you're right. In practice, we've been doing prior councils were probably doing most of this.
Okay.
The point of this is to set it in stone and show the state that we're being very clear and very formal about the documentation of how we're going to proceed going forward.
I understand. So the numbers that we have, they came from general practice, and we're kind of applying them to. Yes, the $50,000 is the one that came to mind. I actually chose those just as I was looking around as a censor check before I submitted it to Keith, and I just looked at other cities and just saw what they were doing, and so I saw that for 2 cities, and I put that in. But I do know that 50,000 was a number that I think prior councils were using.
Isn't that right? I mean, you two are the ones that were here, so I think that's the case.
Yeah, no, I'll if you don't mind, I'd love to follow up on Mr. Braden's thing. So, yeah, I don't have concerns with the 50,000 for the council approving. I think that's fine. I would say the safety service director one, though, in prior years, the safety service director basically approved all POs that were like under his department, or under his purview. So not the treasurer and the auditors, or the law directors, but everything else. I'm not saying we need to get to I'm not saying the safety service director has to approve all of them, but I would say that I think that, the number should probably be lowered. I would think significantly, like to, 10,000 or something like that, in my opinion, because for the safety service director to approve a PO, or for a department head not to have to get safety service director approval for a PO. So
as it stands right now, Clint could enter into $25,000 agreement. Now, in practice, Mr. Murphy's going to know about it. But you're right. We're basically saying that would be okay. And if that's too high, let's change it now.
I personally think it's too high. I think that there's something to be said about, Mr. Murphy knowing that Public Works is entering in a contract with this company, and then maybe the fire department's entering into a contract with a different company, right? Maybe they're 20,000 each, and could be some, things that they could have just done one together. And I just think, again, it's there. The mayor one, I think, is fine at 100,000. I think the council, and especially with council requiring anything at 50,000, well, if we're going to require council to get together to talk about and approve something, right, at that 50,000 threshold, that must be a pretty important threshold. So potentially, I think, like I said, lower for the safety service director. And then the department head one, I'm fine at the $1,000 for that. I think that I'm fine that if it's under $1,000, potentially, like if a clerk at the building department needs to get a PO or whatever, I don't think there's an issue there. So
is 5,000 the number?
I like it the way it is, the way you have it. Like our capital improvements thing, we're going to have items that are going to be pricey, and we have a need to have things done. I feel like that just kind of slows that process down of getting things agreed upon. If it's something that we might think this would be 5,000, and it's all of a sudden 48,000, that's obviously an issue, but I think that whoever's putting that PO together is going to know kind of how much things should be, or getting the bids and quotes in.
Yeah,
well, those might be two different issues. Egregiously exceeding a PO price is different than thresholds to enter into them.
Yeah, but I think going up that 50K mark, well, actually it'd be like 49.9, wouldn't require council approval.
Right. At the moment.
But to me, it's just an extra process.
Yeah, but 45.
Extra step in the process that could slow things down, slow movement down.
Yeah. I was gonna say, but $45,000 is a lot of money. That's not.
I'm sorry.
No,
I don't mean to interrupt.
You're fine. You're fine.
I think you might be onto something. I'm honestly kind of tending to agree with Councilman Bonzel. I don't think it'll slow anything down. Let's say that the safety service director wanted to do something for that type of money. All he has to do is go to the mayor, and then now they just put it over to the mayor. So it'd just be the mayor bringing it to us instead of safety service director. But they both work together, so they're not. One's not going to be doing something, the other one's not. I truly believe that. So I think you might be on something. I don't think we don't need to do that. So I'm okay with bringing that down.
You want to just shift everything down and do the
I'm
mayor
fine with
at
the
50, and then safety service director.
I'll say just
10,
change that to 5.
5.
Well, the thing is, though, too, if we think about it, like
10.
the mayor, I'm fine with the mayor being at 100. Like, I do believe that the safety service director, they run the day-to-day.
It's the city operations.
And plus, if council has to approve it at 50 anyways, I don't really see what the 100 is going to do, even though council has to approve a contract or something at 50, but I guess a purchase order could be for broader if there's multiple things in it. But anyways, long story short, though, is that we're getting to the point when we get the new accounting software that purchase orders are all going to be approved digitally anyways. So, or at least that's what Mr. Stith is trying to do, is to get
That's a fair point.
So maybe, and I haven't got an update on that. I just know that that's his overall goal, and that we don't have paper purchase orders flying around. So, the Public Works superintendent, whether it's Clint or whoever it could be at the time, they could be at their office at Public Works and file it right there, and then send it straight
what
up.
figure did you have in mind?
Personally, I was thinking, again, because safety service director used to approve all POs, so it could be a small one, it could be a big one. I was thinking like 10,000, but
I don't like that. What keeping the mayor at 100 and then moving the 50K down to 35? Still a little bit of leeway, but it's not as heavy.
I mean, I guess with the whole process of everything that has to happen for like getting things done, I still don't understand like getting the safety service director who's in charge. I mean, like I said, who's in charge of running the city, getting him to just sign a signature like, hey, that looks good, everything's good there. I mean, to me, it's just that one extra check to ensure that because I mean, again, I think everybody that's working right now, like, our police chief, our fire chief, our public works, I think they're all stellar people. Honestly, I can't imagine Clint doing a $35,000 contract without talking to Mr. Murphy personally. However, I would rather just set this thing up for an administration that's not as, or employees that aren't as competent as the employees that we have right now.
Yeah, I think that
Explain that way. It makes.
I think we should lower it, and because I don't feel it's going to be the upside of protecting some future situation.
Yeah.
Is going to grossly outweigh any potential, extra work that Mr. Murphy's going to have to feel, and I think that he would be any safety service director would probably be okay seeing anything over. I'm going to say $10,000 because that is a lot of money. And I don't think we have $100,000 POs flying around.
So the safety service director, he works for the mayor. So, he's not performing, the mayor's not going to put up with that. So I'm thinking they're lumped in together. So they're not. I don't see this the SSD doing something without the mayor. So these two are going to be working together. So I don't even know if it has to be anything over 50,000 is coming to us anyway. You put the mayor and the safety service director at the same amount, I think they're going to be working together. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, I mean, what he's talking about is the higher up, above 50,000, right?
And that's fine.
Yeah, like it's coming to us anyway. The mayor's going to know about it at that point.
I'm kind of wondering what the actual administration says about it. Is there any input at all from them, or are we just coming up with numbers? I'm a little curious about that.
Yeah.
I mean, before I just say, I don't really have a preference, except for the fact that I really think they're going to be working together. So.
No, I haven't asked Mr. Murphy his input on this, but I would also say that I do value Mr. Murphy's opinion, but in this particular case, we're trying to set rules independent of.
Well, that's fine.
There's almost some level of separation.
How things have been working in the past. That's fine. I'm not.
Well, you heard in the past there were none. He was doing 100%.
I hear what he said, but I was here. I was here when Mr. Gears was here and Mr. Williams was here. They were working together as one. So there was no. I mean, even you can say what you want about them, they were working together. And I don't think Mr. Gears, doing anything that Mr. Williams didn't know about.
So which number are you talking about specifically right now? Are you talking about which of the three numbers? Are you talking about the mayor number?
Safety service director.
Okay, because my proposal was so the mayor's at 100,000. My proposal was to move that to 10,000. So that would be like underneath the council. So the first threshold is department heads at 1,000. Safety service director, the departments have to go to the SSD at 10,000, and then they have to go to council at 50.
For the sake of argument right now, I'm just going to agree with you because I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm just going to agree with that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it a little higher, even like 15,000. But I mean, if that's where the consensus is at, then that's where the consensus is at.
I mean, that's fine. I'm not. Yeah, 15,000 is fine.
Just to give a little bit more leeway. I don't think there's a lot of people out there.
I mean, it does go 1, 10, 100. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. I don't have any.
1, 10, 100 is nice multiple.
Well, we got the 50 in there too, where it comes to us.
50's
so
almost
110.
Because there's threshold. This is for thresholds, and then the 50 is for.
Well, I'm including it just to keep me on the. So 1, 10, 100.
And then there was, I had a follow-up. We, at the last finance committee meeting, this isn't something we were asked to do, but we talked about this idea of joint or cooperative purchases, and it was actually used in the fire truck, the ladder truck that Chief McCabe was talking about. two general counsels ago. The short version there is you would bypass this minimum three vendor quote process, and there's ORC chapter 948 is what I had in the notes in your paper, is what we talked about in that general counsel meeting. I don't think it's necessary to put into the policy, but when Keith responded, he was like, well, I just saw this in your notes, I didn't know if this is something you just wanted to add on. I could just write it at the bottom of the policy and say, an exception to this rule is joint cooperative purchases as described in, or do we think that doesn't matter?
What you're talking like to not take the lowest bid and take a different?
Well, I'm saying we require 3 bids.
Yeah.
Always. Except for these joint or cooperative purchases, like the fire truck with that, I forget the company now, but they're part of the state. I was knowledgeable then. It's part of the vendor process with the state, and you get we were told we get kind of like a better service agreement, good pricing, because they're not following the normal 3 bid. They're following a joint cooperative policy.
Now, are we doing the 3 bids required for every job, even if it's like a $3,000?
The only thing that's in here is that for the council approval ones,
So
we required
yeah.
evidence of 3 bids before we can approve.
What if we did somewhere it's like, so they didn't want to take the lowest bid and they wanted to go with this other one, they had to
That
write,
requires 1/1 approval.
yeah, and
prior to coming to
are we going to
council.
require them write something like, hey, this is why, like an explanation letter?
You'd need an explanation. Yeah, that the stamp, I imagine,
Yeah.
would be the thing that tells you why it would be okay.
So maybe I missed it. Who requires that, Fred?
Yeah. So when I said you always need to go with the lowest price, full stop.
But the cooperative.
Oh, he jumped.
That, yeah.
The cooperative agreement, that's saying I always have to get 3 vendor quotes, except if something falls under this joint or cooperative purchase.
Okay.
Then I don't need to get 3.
So describe to me how that falls under that. Okay, I heard the fire truck example, but is there somebody that approves that, or does that just say, well, we got to buy this real quick because it's this amount of money, we're going to save all kinds of money?
Yeah, it's not really a money. It's not a monetary level.
Okay.
There are a list in that chapter 948. There are a list of things that fall under this joint. Potentially, if you wanted to use it, these are things you could, I guess, call on a joint or cooperative agreement for it.
Okay.
And like fire truck was under it.
Okay.
So, but there are a list of things under that.
Perfect.
So, Mr. DiNardo, on the then and now purchase order, I did want to comment on that if I could.
I want you to.
So, I think in the past, the then and nows, like there's been, and I'm fine if we want to have council approve it by ordinance. I mean, that seems, there's been times we've had then and nows that have been like $150 or $100. And potentially those, I feel like having to go, like I said, something having to get towed and we didn't have a purchase order in place to get that done. I feel like that potentially we might not want to have an ordinance for every single one of those, even though, again, those should be extraordinary circumstances that shouldn't happen. I would say, like, we should probably, in my opinion, we should put a dollar amount saying that anything under that dollar amount has to be, like, reported to council in a letter read at council, something like that. So maybe it's 500, maybe it's 250. So
as not to clog up the chain.
Yeah, it just
clog up the chain.
exactly. So that way the auditor's office can do what they have to do. Everybody can do what they have to do in those kind of situations. I mean, maybe it's $1,000. Honestly, like that seems like a reasonable number. I think, like I said, I thought it was a little bit higher in the past, but either way, yeah. But again, I think we should be told about these things. I definitely don't want to let these things just go, but I also want to make sure that they're empowered, just like Mr. Kelch said previously, to make sure the city's running.
I mean, I like the idea of 1,000. I mean, it's not a lot of things are going to happen over that. Like, something breaks down, I can't imagine $1,000 or more than that to tow a vehicle.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, I feel like well, I don't know how it actually happens in practice, but like, let's just say a part breaks on the fire engine or whatever. Like, I think they will get a purchase order. I mean, it doesn't take that long to do one. But I think this is something where something came up and it was, I can't think of an exact example, but it's just very rare. So.
Yeah, that's a great thing. So it's meeting the intent, which is we know about it. We're, everyone, it's open kimono. Everyone is all seeing the same thing. But yeah, if it's under $1,000, which hopefully, if they even happen, we're not having to get these votes. Yeah, I'm done. That's a great idea. Okay, thanks for that. This is great because hopefully if we can just submit this, get it cleaned up. If Mr. Moore or Gary have any comments, get it cleaned up and submitted to Ken Miracle, and that's just 3 less things on our list. So every committee's working through their assignments. Hopefully we're kind of compliant with the audit report by the end of the year. So
Now,
pat on the back.
Will this be something council approves at some point?
I have to. I know that the ask was to submit recommended policies. It's a great question though. Like I hit send on the email.
I'm sure we're going to.
Is that all it happens, or do we wait until everything's completed and then just? I don't know the answer.
Well, I have a feeling we're going to come up to a day here, probably sometime this year, where we're going to have 20 ordinances on the agenda to approve all of these policies.
This will come back to us. It have to.
So you think that's what it is? You think we'll just store them all and then just go?
Not necessarily store them all, but I just feel like that we're going to get to a point where they're going to say, you know what, we really should put these in ordinance, and they just all come to us.
Okay.
Who knows? But either way, yeah, I mean, I'm fine if it's not. I think putting an ordinance makes it stronger for the future. So.
Yeah, that's likely what happened. But I am just going to send them to Ken.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Well, if it's something that might come back to us, can we change that 10K to 15? I think it's still financially responsible. It's not too high, and if it does come back and they disagree with it, then we can change it back to 10.
Hey,
or even have like a no.
I don't think anyone was married to any.
Yeah,
because I mean, I know like some of these things are already in capital improvement projects and are already foreseen things that are going to be spending. I feel like if I'm putting myself in that seat of the SSD, I'd rather some of my department heads get these things done rather than me have to look at everything. And not everyone's going to be over 10 grand or even over 15 grand, but I just think it's enough grease to keep the wheel moving.
Yeah, I changed it. It's fine. I think that there is something, or there's kind of a spirit there with these policies. In practice, I believe that Mr. Murphy's probably looking at 99% of them anyway, even if it was $2. So this is more just to make sure that that's a great point. Future personnel are kind of acting in a particularly appropriate way. Cool, guys. Thanks for that. So I'll get that cleaned up.
Yeah, thank you.
And submitted to the right places. 3 done. I think it's like 17 more to go.
We got this, man.
Let's chip away.
Before we get into the second agenda item, I just kind of wanted to use the Finance Committee time, I suppose, to figure out, are we going to do a formal, and I'm asking this of myself and you guys, are we going to do a formal review of revenue projections? I know that and I'm not saying that someone has to come in here, or are we going to make that part of our third quarter budget review? That sort of marries up with the agenda item number 2. But we as a committee, when we first started, we signed up ourselves to doing every 6 months a budget review with the big 3. So that's Public Works, Fire, Police, and then the mayor and the auditor, to make sure that we're working against our budget pretty well, and then preparing the next year's budget, at least kind of like ideating and starting that process. It also allows for the big 3 an opportunity to make sure, are we missing something? Do you know about something that we're grossly underprepared for right now? That really didn't talk about top line or revenue side, and that was my fault. I didn't talk about it. But since James helped us invite Tim Maloney to talk about revenue, and the takeaway we were all left with is It might be okay, but we don't know yet. There's still some big items that'll happen in July. If this third quarter review happens in August, do we bring in Tim? Like, how do we reconcile that with we want to be looking at the revenue side too. That's a question I think a lot of residents are asking is, how are we doing with, how's the city doing with COVID?
So your question is, are we going to do like Formula One as a committee meeting with
Yes.
these folks? I think that would be smart, wise, and people at home could watch and kind of be a part of that too.
Yeah. So that was kind of my idea. What we would need to have happen though is the mayor and the auditor and the big three to all come to a finance committee meeting. That's an option. Another option, I suppose, is I'm kind of asking for your guys' advice here. And maybe one of us, so that we're not having a majority, go and do that just with the big three and then report back. I think and that might work better because maybe not all of them can go at the same time, but we can all get their input kind of like we did with the first plan where we said, tell me your top 10 needs list, tell me your timeline. Remember we kind of went through that with each of you guys? That allows them at least to make sure their voice is heard if they can't actually physically be here at that time. So we need to have a third quarter budget review. How should that happen? Is kind of the question to you guys.
I'm okay with, we don't have to have a formal meeting, and if you have projections or if you want to meet with them, I'll give you, you got my full approval. So I don't have any issues at all with that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any issues with it. I just think a formal one would always be better,
We're gonna have a hard
but I
time getting
mean,
them all here.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's probably impractical to try to do whatever
Yeah.
was in my head.
Yeah.
And so it might be more
I mean,
practical
if possible, it would be very nice and it would be the best option, but
Don't they submit do they submit their budgets to us? Is that how that works? They give us a budget and then
That is how it works in practice. We have been, though, when we reapproved the financial recovery plan, that is basically because we can't deviate from that plan, essentially. So really, we really focus on the budgets during the plan. So we have a 2021 right now plan for police fire. So if we don't update financial recovery plan, they do still have to submit it around September, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change the recovery plan at that time to go with whatever we want to do.
and I
Basically,
think
you need to compare. I'm sorry, sir.
no, you're
You
fine.
basically need to get projections from these people and compare them with our numbers that we have down to make sure they're kind of matching up, and just to prepare for our next.
Yeah, well, it's almost two comparisons.
Yeah.
It's to compare against the existing plan, which is more than relatively fixed, and see, okay, knowing these plus and minuses against plan, what are we going to do about that on 2021?
You should probably. I think you should. I think you should probably compile those evidence unless you need help.
I mean, I think
Unless you need help.
I would love for you. We kind of were
Yeah.
doing it in practice
Yeah.
anyway when we were making the plans.
Yeah, so I mean, just my thoughts on this is that one, I don't think if you have the police and fire chief should be responsible for their own budgets. Now they do report up to the safety service director, but if you watch, I think the City of Cincinnati Finance Committee meeting, I'm pretty sure it's the police and fire chiefs that are coming to talk about their budgets. I mean, I think the city manager's there in practice, but it should be them. I think it would be fine having them and not having to have the mayor there or the safety service director there. So I would be okay with them coming, and I honestly think that they would probably love to communicate to us too, just about what they're seeing, what might be coming, what we might be missing in the plan in the future. And at least I know, Chief McCabe in particular, he's very diligent, so I think he would.
So to say it back to you, you're actually suggesting don't try to get the whole team, just get the big three here at one of our finance committee meetings, just to kind of do that comparison first against plan, and then if we're under or it's mostly under. If we're not thinking or preparing about something based on the current 2020 plan, at least it's on our minds and highlighted for when we draft the 2021.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
So the other thing,
but I like that.
yeah, I mean, it's just an idea. I mean, I'm not saying that the mayor and safety service director doesn't have to, can't come if they want to, but I don't I think that we would get enough information, I think, from the police and fire chief that if we have additional questions, we can then go to the
Sure.
mayor
I follow.
and talk to them. But I mean, I'm also okay though too if you want to do a review and then give us a good, however you kind of want to do it. I'm really not super key on. I do think though that we should. It's not something. I mean, we've had the pandemic. Things happened. We weren't meeting as much. But I do think that we should try to make sure that we are really going through these financial reports though and looking for anomalies, proactively. So, and especially when it comes to the capital improvement keys. So, we should, in my opinion, we should just be making sure that things aren't getting missed because, I'm still frustrated from last year when we allocated money to replace the lights at Waterworks 4. So to do a complete replace the lights, replace the electric, it was going to be. I mean, it was a project that was needed. It was a project that we had the money for. It was a project that the administration asked for, but they never did it. And the same thing with the roof. We had the roof at City Hall. We had money for it. We appropriated it. Just never got done. So,
Well, what's nice though about that is for the Parks Committee stuff, we talk about it all the time, and that's something that we can actively go on. Some of these other things, like the roof and it, there's not really a committee over it per se to push for those things. But
yeah,
I totally get what you're saying.
And if they're not, and even we should look at the parks one too. And if we can, I've got, I looked at the EMS one. So we had $230,000 we've appropriated. I think there's an encumbrance for $230, right? But so I'm guessing it's for an ambulance that they'll have at some point, which we know is coming.
But then you can hit a tick mark next
we
to that.
can just make sure that that they're on it, things are moving, whatever. And not that we do it every month, but probably at least every quarter we should be at least reviewing it. Not necessarily having everybody here, but we can review it on our own and just think about, hey, let's just divvy up questions that we want to go chase.
I like that too, because then also if it's if the projections are off, then we can say, all right, well, we can hold off on this one for now, or hey, we need to get these things done while we have that. And I think if we're looking at those things at that same time, then it kind of lets us know.
Well, yeah, actually, I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I think we can do those at the same meeting. We can have, picturing 3 more seats, maybe even if Tim wants to come and help us understand revenue now that it's better understood, so potentially 4. And we start with the capital improvement plan, we do the tick marks, and then I suppose it allows those heads to say if things aren't being met, that should be. So actually, that's not only a great point, I think we can do it at the same time. Is that where you're good?
Yeah, no, that would be fine, yeah.
All right, that's going to be I'll figure out what works I'll kind of socialize that idea with the relevant folks, see if I can get some semblance of a date range, and then throw it back to us and say, the next Finance Committee meeting, sometime in August, should be to review mostly the capital improvements plan, but the financial reports with you guys, have the big 3, and they should have their budgets ready to tell us if things are grossly missed or something like that. And so that way we're feeling comfortable about the operations of the city meeting what we said they were supposed to meet, kind of the strategy that we laid out in March. And it also says if things changed, the big 3 are here to kind of, give their guidance on that.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah. So just another component to that. So public lands and buildings, we have capital improvements we appropriated 1.1 million for. So we've got year-to-date expenses 120,000, and then encumbrances 17,000. So I forgot all the other things. I can pull up the capital improvements plan. I forgot exactly what we all thought about in there, but that's one where we'd want to go and say, hey, these are all the items that we thought we were going to get done in public lands and buildings. Are there reasons why we haven't gotten done? Are they just in process? Or there could be things that we can't do for whatever reason, or things that came in under bid, and we could say, hey, let's look at that capital improvements plan. Let's bring that back to this. Let's say, look, let's add this here. Let's maybe move this around. The capital improvements plan is not necessarily, that's not, the financial recovery plan. The Financial Recovery Commission doesn't necessarily have to approve that. That was really more of a council document that's kind of an addendum, if you will. So that can actually be changed, probably by ordinance or motion of council, if we wanted to do that. Now, I don't imagine we changing it that often, but
Talking moving like money from one key to the other?
No, not a key, but like just changing the plan, the items that were under each key. So like, let's say that we were thinking that for the parks that we were going to do the stairs between Upper and Lower Millcrest, but maybe something's changed. Maybe we're going to do a trail now, and we now have $80,000 or whatever that we could put elsewhere. Let's reevaluate that plan and let's say, hey, let's move an improvement in 2021. Let's kind of prioritize that for 2020. And then let the administration know what we as council are thinking when it comes to those capital dollars. So
Yeah.
we're not moving the dollars around.
So that's
moving what they would go to.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because so in our parks, we're capital improvements plan. We're facing that right now. Where we're coming in under bid on a lot of jobs, and myself and Thompson are going to be going to look at Fenwick Park to see what improvements they need. What I was planning on doing, because there's not really a set process, is getting with Zimmerman, getting with John Murphy, and kind of adding those in and getting with Stead to put those in there into that same key, since it's money that's already allocated to the key, and those line items are kind of just there. So like creating a clear process for that, I do agree with, but I don't think it has to be like a council vote on it, really, or an ordinance to add a item in there if it's already money allocated for that key.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I don't. So if the administration, I mean, really, they don't have to follow the plan
Yeah.
at all. I mean, it's really more of a we would like you
It's
to
a
kind of
suggestion, yeah.
we would like you to follow those. So it would more be on our end saying, hey, this is kind of our recommendations for priorities. It's not saying that they can't go, like if there's extra money that they can't go like find another capital expense that needs to be done and get that done. So it's just more helping them, just helping to formally communicate and also letting citizens know too, like what does this council prioritize? Like what's important to us so that they know that their voice is being heard. Like, look, we're putting the stuff in there that you're talking about.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have the mayor and the city director in this kind of like vision for everyone being together for that budget review is when we go through, well, hey, I have your example. I have a huge allotment or in the capital improvement fund for 2021. My encumbered balances is a tenth of that. What's going on? And there could be a great explanation, but now we have an explanation, or we don't, and we just want to kind of express that it's something we're highlighting. The takeaway, if those folks aren't here, is I would just get a list of all the things that we talked about or noted that we wanted to see either communicated or actioned, and I have somewhere to send it, and then we just kind of have had a conversation together around that list of.
So you're talking about if we want to add something into that, come to this committee and talk about it here, not on council floor, right?
Yeah, that's what this potential like big meeting would try to do. And we try to go through our needs and say, have these been worked on? Have these not been worked on? And is there a financial constraint holding that up? Well, that's I'll figure out how to word that, and I'll make sure that it's talked to with all the relevant people, as I said. But I think that's the next finance committee is going to be the big get-together, the big kumbaya, where we very intentionally, line by line, or not line by line, but go through the areas that we think, either should have actioned or need explained. And then we also have the department heads here to tell us if we're missing something glaring. I think that's a very useful meeting. And James, I know you said we should be doing that quite often. At a minimum, that's going to be done every 6 months in this finance committee. But maybe if it's really successful, or we see a need to do it even more frequently, we can decide to do that then. But
yeah, no, that sounds good. And it could just be literally us going through, and like I said, I think there's conversations that could happen that are not. We don't necessarily have to have the mayor and safety service director here. You can go, like you can see, we can identify that, hey, look, there's a discrepancy there. You can ask, if you want to, I'm not trying to put work on you, but you can find out why that's like, what is that, there's a $900,000 difference between what we appropriated and what's either been spent or encumbered. Let's go and figure out, like, are there projects that are about to be done?
Explain or act.
Yeah, exactly. And then you find out, look, they actually don't have enough projects identified. Like, okay, yep. Council, let's figure out, do we want to recommend projects that they should be doing? So,
yeah.
I really kind of leave it up to you. We can bring them in every 6 months, or we can bring them in. I mean, I like bringing them in every 6 months, but we can bring them in more often, or we can just kind of meet as a committee and figure out like.
Let's see who even shows up. I think at a minimum, there's 4 people here who are definitely going to be here at the next finance committee, and we are going to go through these lines and see. And we can do. You all have the capital improvements plan. We can. I expect all of us to do some homework beforehand and get some of the higher priority items that are important to you or seem funny. Funny being our encumbered balances seem a heck of a lot less than what's on there. Let's come together. Let's go through that list. And if the folks are here, the more the better, because then we can just swivel our chairs and talk to them. But if they're not, James, that's a great point. I can just make sure that we have a running list. I'll have those conversations outside of the finance committee, and then the nice, deliverable at the end of all this is we have a list with explanation or action that we can go talk to the other committees, relevant committees about. So yeah, I'm excited we're doing this. It was an ask that I wanted to hold us to, and it's at a minimum 6 months, maybe more frequently. We'll see. Cool. I'll set it up, guys. Those are the 2 items on my mind, but feel free to add anything, new business stuff.
If you got a couple, like let's say, if you start asking these guys, one or two might want to come, they want to come, but if they don't want to come, just they can submit it to they can write
That's
it down,
exactly right.
write it down or submit it to you and you can bring it, and so just add if they want to come, that's great, but if not, they can just. It doesn't have to be that formal.
Yeah, and I would think if there was like a big budget concern on their behalf, they would probably be here to
Come here
explain.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, they would.
I'm going to reach out to them very soon and start to
Great.
set this up, guys. So,
Nice job.
it hasn't happened yet, but I'm excited about it.
Tonight.
Are there any other new items you got on your mind?
So I would just wanted to bring up potentially meeting. It's I know we met July. We're going to meet again in August. Hopefully we can try. I think we should try to at least get together, and even if the topics like city finances, where we can just whatever kind of topics are like I run through this and see that in our street fund, we appropriated $800,000, but we've only spent $20,000. Like, hey, like what's going on? Now I do know what's going on there in the sense that we don't have streets identified that we're going to actually repave. So. But anyways, I'd like us to try it if we can, get together once a month if possible. I think, it doesn't have to be a super long meeting, but just to make sure that we're like keeping our eyes on this stuff and things coming up. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. We are going to meet in August. I have a feeling that September's we're getting close to budget time, so I'm sure we would have met anyways there. So it's not that we wouldn't have met these next couple months, but
You're just saying to set a precedent, just set a goal to try to get it.
Yeah, or like keep track too of like the capital improvements and stuff like that.
yeah. Because not every committee is the Parks Committee when it comes to like watching every dollar. So, it'd be good for us to make sure we keep our eyes on that too.
Understood.
Yeah, I could be free for that.
Cool. All right. That's it. Are we sure?
That's it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks, everybody.
Nice job, guys.
I would expect that the one in August to take a minute. So yeah, I guess the ask is just once we set the date and the time, just go through the plan and we get the financial reports. If you don't get a copy, they're sent to me. So if you don't have a copy, I think they are sent to everybody.
Yeah, and that's the meeting you would probably I would print out, or if you want, I'll tell you which ones you should print. But you should print out the expense account, current year only. You may want to print out the or have it on a computer. But I would have that like with you because they're going to be talking about these numbers, and you're going to want to like flip through.
So yeah, it's just the ask to do a little bit of pre-work.
Well, I'm not used to having to print my own stuff here, man. I'm used to being spoiled.
Or ask no, you can definitely forward it. Ask the clerk of council to print it. Definitely the city can print it. But
I'm just joshing.
I wouldn't print every single month. But yeah, expense account current year only, the cash report, and you may want to do the one that has the encumbrances on it too. And then,
you know what?
We never really adjourned, did we? Or
Not really, but I screwed up. I said yeah, and then I kept talking. So
We're good.
we're fine. We're just chatting. I'm sorry.
We're good.
And what else?
We
James?
really shouldn't.
No, well, I mean, we can, even though it's not recording, I mean, we can just say this is still part of the meeting,
Yeah.
so it's probably fine. So the expense account current year only, I would print the, any POs that don't have enough funds in them, like that, there's a report that comes out for that. Because that way we can ask questions about, hey, why don't these things have funds? And then the cash report, so the one that just has the cash balances for all the funds. Yeah, I would just have those three. I think that's a good start, and it'll allow us to follow along when they're talking about, how much money they have left in the personnel key or the materials and supplies. So.
Yeah.
What was the third thing you said? You said the
cash
the
management,
expense accounts and
expense
the
amount
POs
count
that
current
don't
year
have
only.
enough.
And then the one that basically that report of purchase orders that have insufficient funds. It's like,
Purchase orders that have insufficient funds, but then there was a third thing you said after that.
oh, okay. Did I say the cash report? Cash balance report.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
So
The
yeah, it should be
expense account. The
expense account current year only. Cash.
Yeah.
It's like cash balance. I forgot the exact name. I can look it up here. And then statement of cash position. Expense account current year only. And then the last one is the. It says the NSF purchase order report. So, which means just non-sufficient funds purchase order report. I would just have those three, and then like I said, I'll have my computer, so I won't print them myself, but I'll at least note. But those are what I would print out if I were to come to that meeting with like department heads and stuff.
And have pre-read.
And then the big three. So that when you say big three, you're meaning police chief, fire chief, police department, fire department, and then is that the public works? Is that the other
Yes.
one of the big three? Okay.
Am I wrong?
No. I just want to make sure that I fully understand
Yeah.
the third of the big three. I mean, I love. Yeah.
The
I
big
love
two
it.
and a half, then.
Yeah. I was gonna say. I think they want to be a big three, but
Well, they used to be.
they're getting. But at least we're getting them the tools they need now. At least, and they used to.
I mean,
literally-
I consider them pretty essential.
Oh yeah.
So I just want to, and if nothing else, it's also like just acknowledgement that I want to make sure that we're
Yes.
listening to your needs and making sure that if it's possible, we're hearing if the plan is meeting the mark.
No, I agree completely. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure I understood
Cool.
the third of the big three. So.